Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our last chapter of Island of the Blue Dolphins. Today, we will continue reading from chapter 29. So last time, remember, Wanapale saw a ship come. Someone came on shore and called and called and called for her. She went and grabbed her beautiful clothes and was ready to go and gets down to shore. And they had already gone back to the ship, and the ship was sailing away. And she stood there looking until the ship sailed away. Now, we tried to make a prediction about whether the ship would just come back after the storm or what would happen. So keep your prediction close. Let's see what happens next. And also in the last chapters, she experienced a tsunami and an earthquake on the island, and she was very, very terrified because of that. So today we are going to read our last chapter as well as the author's notes. So the author's note is the part that the author explains how he or she made the story, what information they had when they made the story. Okay, so let's go ahead and read, find out what happens. Chapter 29. After 2 more springs had gone, on the morning of white clouds and calm seas, the ship came back. At dawn, I saw it from the headland far out in the horizon. When the sun was overhead, it lay anchored at Coral Cove. Until the sun went down, I watched from the headland while the men made a camp on the shore and built a fire. Then I went to my house. All that night I did not sleep, thinking of the men who had once called to me. I had thought of his voice calling for a long time, since the night of the storm when the ship had sailed away. Every day during those 2 springs and 2 summers, I had gone to the headland and watched, always at dawn and always at dusk. In the morning I smelled smoke from their fire. I went down to the ravine and bathed in the spring and put on my otter cape and my cormorant skirt. I put on the necklace of black stones and the black earrings. With blue clay I made the mark of our tribe across my nose. Then I did something that made me smile to myself. I did what my older sister Ulape had done when she left the island of the Blue Dolphins. Below the mark of our tribe, I carefully made the sign which meant I was still unmarried. I was no longer a girl, yet I made it anyway, using the blue clay and white clay for the dots. I went back to the house and then built a fire and cooked food for Rantu, Aru, and me. I was not hungry, and he ate my food and his too. "We are going away," I said to him, "away from our island." But he only put his head to one side, as his father often had done, and when I said no more, he trotted out to the sunny place and lay down and fell asleep. Now that the white men had come back, I could not think of what I would do when I went across the sea, or make a picture in my mind of the white men and what they did there, or see my people that had been gone so long. Nor, thinking of the past, of the many summers and winters and springs that had gone, could I see each of them. They were all a tight feeling in my breast and nothing more. The morning was full of sun. The wind smelled of the sea and things that lived in it. I saw the men long before they saw the house on the headland far off in the dunes to the south. There were 3 of them, 2 tall men and one who was short and wore a long gray robe. They left the dunes and came along the cliff, and then, seeing the smoke from the fire which I kept burning, followed it, and at last reached my house. I crawled under the fence and stood facing them. The man in the gray robe had a string of beads around his neck, and at the end of it was an ornament of polished wood. He raised his hand and made a motion toward me, which was the shape of the ornament he wore. Then one of the 2 men who stood behind him spoke to me. His words made the strangest sounds I have ever heard, and at first I wanted to laugh, but I bit my tongue. I shook my head and smiled at him. He spoke again slowly this time, and though his words sounded the same as before and meant nothing to me, they now seemed sweet. They were the sound of a human voice. There is no sound like this in all the world. The man lifted his hand and pointed toward the cove and made a picture in the air of what could have been a ship. To this I nodded, and myself pointed to 3 baskets I had placed by the fire, making a gesture of taking them with me to the ship. Also the cage in which I had put 2 young birds. There were many gestures before we left, though the 2 men spoke among themselves. They liked my necklace, the cape, and the cormorant skirt that shone in the sun. But when we got to the beach where their camp was, the first thing the man who spoke the most did was tell the other to make me a dress. I knew this is what he said because one of them stood in front of me and held up a string from my neck to my feet and across my shoulders. The dress was blue. It was made of 2 trousers, just like the ones the men were wearing. The trousers were cut up into pieces, and then one of them sat down on a rock and put them together again with white string. He had a long nose, which looked like the needle he used. He sat all afternoon on the rock, and the needle went back and forth, in and out, flashing in the sun. From time to time, he would hold up the dress and nod his head as if he were pleased. I nodded as if I were pleased too, but I was not. I wanted to wear my cormorant skirt and my otter cape, which were much more beautiful than the thing he was making. The dress reached from my throat to my feet, and I did not like it, either the color of it or the way it scratched. It was also hot, but I smiled and put my cormorant skirt away in one of the baskets to wear it when I got across the sea, sometime when the men were not around. The ship stayed at Coral Cove 9 days. It had come for Otter, but the otter had gone. Some must have been left after all, who remembered the Alouds, for in that morning there were none to be seen. I knew where they had gone. They had gone to Tall Rock. But when the men showed me the weapons they had brought to kill the otter, I shook my head and acted as though I did not understand. They pointed to my otter cape, but I still shook my head. I asked them then about the ship that had taken my people away many years before, making signs of the ship and pointing to the east, but they did not understand. Not until I came to Mission Santa Barbara and met Father Gonzalez did I learn from him that this ship had sunk in a great storm soon after it reached his country, and that on the whole ocean thereabouts there was no other. For this reason the white men had not come back for me. On the 10th day we sailed. It was the morning of blue skies and no wind. We went straight toward the sun. For a long time I stood and looked back at the island of the Blue Dolphins. The last thing I saw of it was the high headland. I thought of Rontu lying there beneath the stones of many colors, and of Wanani wherever she was, and the little red fox who would scratch in vain at my fence, and my canoe hidden in the cave, and of all the happy days. Dolphins rose out of the sea and swam before the ship. They swam for many leagues in the morning through the bright water, leaving their foamy patterns. The little birds were chirping in their cage, and Rontu Aru was beside me. The end. So she was rescued, and did you catch why she was not rescued earlier? Yes, so right after they arrived, the village of Galisat arrived to wherever they were going. The ship went back out, but it sank. And so nobody was there to tell them, hey, go back and get her. And so that's why she was on the island all alone for so long. And even the people that she just now got on the boat with, on the ship with, had not come to rescue her. They just happened to find her. And so that's how she's able to leave Island of the Blue Dolphins. So let's read the author's note, because the author's note will give us an idea of what we actually know about Wana Pele, what we know about her real life, and what was made up by the author. And when I say made up, authors don't always just make things up. They use artifacts, they use things that are found on islands, they use information that they gather, probably information that whoever talked to Wana Pele got, and then they try to piece together a story. So trying to make a story from all the little bits and pieces is a little bit like putting a puzzle together and having some missing pieces and trying to see how could that fit based on what you know about the culture at that time or the tribes that lived in that area. So let's see what the author has to say, because remember, this is based on a true story. Wana Pele was a real person. And let's see what happens, okay? So here we go. The author's note. The island called in this book the Island of the Blue Dolphins was first settled by Indians in about 2000 BC, or before Christ. So we have BC, which is before Christ, and AD, which is after Christ. but it was not discovered until 1602. In that year, the Spanish explorer Sebastian Vizcaino set out from Mexico in search of a port where treasure galleons from the Philippines could find shelter in case of distress. Sailing north along the California coast, he sighted the island, sent a small boat ashore, and named it La Isla de San Marcos, in honor of the patron saint of sailors, travelers, and merchants. As the centuries passed, California changed from Spanish to Mexican hands. The Americans arrived, but only occasional hunters visited the island. Its Indian inhabitants remained in isolation. The girl, Robinson Crusoe, that's what they called her, Robinson Crusoe, whose story I have attempted to recreate, actually lived alone upon this island from 1835 to 1853. So that is a great math problem. 1835 to 1853. How long did Wanapale live on the island all alone? Remember, we tried to figure out how old Rontu might have been and why he died. So once you figure that out, you will know. Okay. She's known in history as the lost woman of the San Nicolas. The facts about her are few. From the reports of Captain Hubbard, whose schooner carried away the islands of Gallisat, we know that the girl did jump into the sea despite efforts to restrain her. From records left by Captain Nedevar, we know that he found her 18 years later, alone with a dog, in a crude house on the headland, dressed in a skirt of cormorant feathers. Father Gonzalez of Santa Barbara Mission, who befriended her after her rescue, learned that her brother had been killed by wild dogs. He learned little else, for she spoke to him only in signs. Neither he nor the many Indians at the mission could understand her strange language. The Indians of Gallisat had long since disappeared. The lost woman of San Nicolas is buried on a hill near the Santa Barbara Mission. Her skirt of green cormorant feathers was sent to Rome. Outermost of the 8 Channel Islands, San Nicolas is about 75 miles southwest of Los Angeles. For years, historians thought that it had been settled some 6 centuries ago, but recent carbon-14 tests of excavations on the island show that Indians came here from the north long before the Christian era. Their images of creatures of the land, sea, and air, similar to those found on the shores of Alaska, and carved with extraordinary skill, may be seen at the Southwest Museum in Los Angeles. The future of San Nicolas is unclear. It is now a secret base of the United States Navy, but scientists predict that because of the pounding waves and furious winds, it will one day be swept back into the sea. In the writing of Island of the Blue Dolphins, I am deeply indebted to Maud and Delo Lovelace, to Bernice Eastman Johnson of Southwest Museum, and to Fletcher Carr, formerly curator of the San Diego Museum of Man. So, what is really a fact? What are some things that we do know about Wanapale? She did jump back in the water to go back after her brother. We know that that is true. We do know that her brother was killed by wild dogs. We do know that she left the island with a dog, so she made a pet of a dog somehow. And we do know that she was on the island alone for 18 years. So there is the answer to your math problem. Very, very good job. So I want to show you, just in case you're not sure, here is where Los Angeles is. So here is the United States. The purple one is the United States. New York is on this side. The West Coast is over here. Los Angeles is around somewhere in the middle here. And out here in all this blue water are lots and lots of islands. So the island of San Nicolas, which is 75 miles from Los Angeles out into the water, it's not very far in a big ship like we have today, but in a canoe was probably a really scary trip to take. That's where this story takes place. And now, of course, nobody's living on the island. It's used by the U.S. Navy. And it's interesting because they do mention that the scientists actually talk about all the earthquake activity and the fierce winds that that island experiences. So there is the end of our story, Island of the Blue Dolphins, one of my favorite books, and I really, really hope you enjoyed reading it with me, that you'd enjoyed the adventure, and that also it will help you do some research. Try and look up the island. Try and find out a little bit more about Wanapale. And think about what book you might want to read next. These are older classic books. We don't always see these in our school libraries, but one of my favorite books. And I really, really hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, goodbye for now. I will see you when we start another book. Have a great day. Bye.